My wife had previously indicated her intention to accuse me of wrongdoing following my discovery of her infidelity. In anticipation of this, I installed surveillance equipment that exposed her dishonesty and ultimately contributed to my success in the divorce proceedings a few days ago. Recently, my children discovered a young rabbit and brought it home, where they expressed a desire to keep it. However, we are unable to accommodate a wild rabbit due to our existing commitments to other pets. The rabbit was of a sufficient age to fend for itself, and I attempted to persuade my children to return it to its natural habitat. I informed my children that the rabbit needed to be returned to its family. They were sad but agreed to take it back. However, I was busy with work and unable to accompany them, so my wife went instead. I advised her to release the rabbit in the thorn bushes at the end of the property, as this was the safest location. Our area is prone to predators. I returned to work shortly after, but remained concerned. Subsequently, my children returned to the house, visibly distressed, with my wife in tow, attempting to pacify them and reassure them that the incident was not as traumatic as they perceived. I inquired about the circumstances, and my eldest child relayed that their mother had instructed them to release the rabbit in the center of the yard, where it was subsequently seized by a hawk. They even described the anguished cries of the rabbit. I was both dismayed and enraged at my wife for not adhering to my advice. My wife's response was to defend herself, stating that it was merely a bunny and that the children would soon recover from the incident. However, I advised her that her actions were misguided and that the children would likely experience distress due to the presence of predators. As a result, both of our children retreated to their respective rooms and ceased communication with their mother for several days. When she attempted to engage with them, they responded with hostility, referring to her as the bunny ki. I have attempted to facilitate a resolution, but my children remain upset, and I am still displeased with my wife for the way things transpired. She is angry with me for not supporting her, and she has accused me of failing to uphold the traditional roles of a husband and wife. We had a heated discussion where I repeatedly highlighted her lack of support. She became emotional and withdrew to our room to sulk. I am now questioning my actions and wondering if I made a mistake. I am currently awake, so I have been advised to pose my query here. I am aware that hawks require sustenance, and they are prevalent in our region. However, I was reluctant for my children, aged 4 and 5, to witness such an incident at such a tender age. I was raised in a rural environment, whereas my spouse hails from an urban background. During my formative years, when confronted with a similar situation involving a wild creature that had been apprehended, our approach was to release it in a location where it would not be at risk of conflict. I would like to clarify that I did not raise my voice at my wife. I am unsure where in my original post it states that I did so. I did, however, reprimand her. I did not raise my voice, even when we engaged in a heated discussion later on. We did so in hushed tones so that our children would not overhear. I was unable to accompany them to release the rabbit because I was unable to leave my office. I work from home half of each week and am required to be accessible by phone at all times to respond to calls. I did not contact my wife during work hours, except during my lunch break. Additionally, I did not refer to her by the derogatory nickname that our children have bestowed upon her following the incident with the rabbit. I have attempted to dissuade them from using such language, and I will not refer to my wife in such a manner, as it is disrespectful and akin to bullying behavior. I offer my sincerest apologies for the numerous edits to my original post. However, I must clarify that my children were not unsupervised in the yard at the time. My wife is a stay-at-home mother. At this juncture, it is pertinent to interject that I was at home with my children when they discovered the rabbit. They returned to the house with it, and I informed them that it needed to be released. Edit 4. I am disconcerted to realize that I am compelled to make yet another edit. However, individuals persist in pointing out details that I had not previously considered. I can affirm that this incident was not copied from an online video, although I have not viewed the original footage. Nevertheless, I am aware that hawks frequently capture small animals. It is therefore unsurprising that this situation would occur to individuals other than those who recorded a similar incident on video. I do not believe that this is a coincidence. My property is comprised primarily of grassy, flat land, with the exception of the house and one tree. I own 4 acres, and the grass was last mowed on Sunday, resulting in a relatively short height. The unfortunate bunny may have had a similar experience to that of a target customer. The rabbit was positioned on its back due to the presence of hawks in the area. Since childhood, I have been engaged in a conflict with hawks, utilizing an air rifle to protect baby chicks. These animals have a proclivity for capturing young rabbits, which is a source of frustration for me. Consequently, I advised my wife to release the rabbit into the nearby bushes. Edit 5. I am exasperated by the assertion that hawks are merely part of the natural cycle of life or that they are simply following their instincts. As a child, I was compelled to safeguard animals from hawks in defiance of their natural behaviors. Farmers, too, have a right to protect their livestock from predators. We were determined to prevent the hawks from taking all the baby chicks, which they would have done on a daily basis. I was armed with a pellet gun, but it only served to further deter the hawks. I never actually shot one, though I did hit a few, but they merely turned tail and flew away. I did, in fact, shoot one down. I did, however, only hit a few, but they were barely any. All it ever did was make them turn tail and fly away. I have not shot at a hawk in 25 years. I never enjoyed shooting anything alive. My grandfather was the one who was responsible for taking down hawks and coyotes with real guns. However, I grew up with a deep familiarity with hawks taking small animals. Hawks have no problem finding food. They are present throughout our area, but they are opportunistic, as are most predators. This is the reason why I wanted to let the bunny go in the bushes. However, as I previously stated, I was unable to leave my desk, which many people still do not seem to understand or did not take the time to read the update. I am unsure if this is the correct version, but I cannot think of anywhere else to post this for those who remember me. I am the individual whose wife released a wild rabbit in the middle of our yard, despite my advice to have the children take it to the bushes to release it safely, was subsequently attacked by a hawk. The incident occurred in front of both of our children, aged 4 and 5 at the time. The children were visibly distressed and ran back to me in tears. Our children began referring to their mother as the rabbit, which is a term that is inappropriate for a human being. The name, Slaughter, seems appropriate now, as others have also referred to her by that moniker. What transpired with the unfortunate bunny is a distant memory when compared to the events that I am about to relate. I speak as a free man, having recently concluded my divorce proceedings a few months ago. The following account is likely to be lengthy and complex, so I request your patience. Edit. AP stands for, a fair partner. I apologize for the lack of clarity in my previous communication. I should have articulated this information at an earlier juncture. My wife was enraged when I showed her my original Reddit post, which led to a heated altercation and a week-long period of silence on her part. I attempted to rectify the mistreatment of our children's mother, even after she was disciplined with minor groundings and timeouts, but the derogatory nickname persisted. Following the anger directed by our children towards their mother, my wife ceased her cold shoulder routine after a couple of weeks. She acknowledged that she should have heeded my advice regarding the bunny and taken it to the bushes as I had suggested. She asserted that she felt the need to defend herself because she did not want to be incorrect. I accepted her apology and apologized for my own role in the situation. The Reddit post suggested that marriage counseling would be beneficial, but my wife refused. She asserted that there were no issues in our marriage, and I chose not to pursue the matter further since our interactions appeared to be improving. However, after a few weeks, my eldest daughter confided in me, stating that she had another reason for her mother's prolonged anger. The child referred to the man as the bunny. She was reluctant to divulge this information, so I provided comfort and reassured her that she could confide in me. However, her disclosure shocked me and transformed the situation. She revealed that her mother had been bringing a man to their residence on several Saturdays when I was at work. She referred to him as her special friend. To maintain secrecy, the child employed various forms of bribery to influence the children's silence. However, my eldest child I came to understand that something was amiss and that it would take time to build up the courage to tell her. It is important to acknowledge that children are adept at discerning information and picking up on subtle cues. I find it frustrating when individuals disregard this fact. I had recently observed my wife's behavior to be somewhat altered. She had become more reserved, particularly with our children. I attempted to initiate a conversation about this with her when I showed her my first After posting, my wife proceeded to launch a volley of accusations against me, targeting my appearance, character, habits, and even my family. She even brought up the fact that I used to smoke, despite having quit over a decade ago. This led to a series of increasingly hostile actions, including locking me out of our bedroom and crying loudly, to the point where I felt compelled to intervene. My eldest child then approached me, and I found myself in a position where I had to take immediate action. In addition, she was unfaithful, and her behavior was similar to the mood swings she experienced during pregnancy with both of our children. This is significant because the mood swings were even more pronounced than what I had previously observed. My wife was both very moody due to hormonal changes and projecting her emotions because of her infidelity. I do not claim to be an expert in psychology, but I can offer an informed perspective based on my observations. In psychology, the hypothesis seems to be supported by the evidence. I had hoped that the situation would be resolved through a process of mutual understanding. However, I quickly ordered and set up a few hidden cameras without disclosing my intentions to anyone. I had them delivered to my workplace, ensuring that no one at home would be aware of their presence. I then set them up on a day when my wife was out with her friends. It was relatively simple to connect the cameras to the Wi-Fi network. In a relatively short period of time, I was able to monitor the entire house from my home PC and work PC. Initially, I was concerned that I might be overstepping boundaries. However, if it turned out that I was mistaken, I could simply remove the cameras and no one would ever know. Unfortunately, my worst fears were confirmed as I gathered substantial evidence in just the first week. It turns out that the man my wife has taken as an AP is actually a former colleague of hers. I remembered him quite well, as they seemed close with my wife. Whenever I met him at various functions, my wife had already quit her job years ago to become a full-time mother. After my wife became pregnant with our first child, we made the decision together to maintain her connection with her former colleague. The workers were her closest associates, but that is no longer the case. What I am about to reveal has caused her to become the subject of universal animosity. Firstly, the AP is approximately a decade her junior. She mentored him at her former place of work, assuming the role that she vacated upon her departure. The two of them remained in close contact, maintaining a bond that was particularly strong. My wife and I are both, despite being over 40 years of age, she presents as a woman in her 20s. This has led to her being mistaken for someone in their 20s on numerous occasions. I eventually confided in my sister about the situation and showed her the footage from the nanny cams. She informed me that she had suspected something was amiss for some time. Furthermore, she stated that she had observed my wife engaging in a compromising position with a male individual at a local establishment. While they were in proximity, there was no physical contact between them, merely a series of shoulder and lower back touches. Given the uncertainty surrounding the incident, she did not inform me immediately. Consequently, I proceeded to procure a GPS tracking device, which revealed that after I obtained it, my wife proceeded to a different location. At work, I concealed the device in the trunk of my wife's vehicle. My sister and her husband agreed to assist me, and they monitored the tracker during my wife's next scheduled social engagement. Instead of going to her usual venue, she proceeded to an entirely different location, approximately 20 miles further away. There, she met with AP, my sister, and her brother-in-law. My in-law observed them for some time from their car and noticed AP kept rubbing her belly while they were talking. They recorded video of this too. When I saw the footage, I knew she had to be pregnant with his baby since she was so moody at home. My sister and Bill had to calm me down because I became extremely distressed. I considered self-medicating with alcohol, but my sister advised me that this would be the worst course of action at the time. I ultimately decided to take a leave of absence from work, informing my wife that I would be on a business trip. She was visibly pleased by this news and did not attempt to conceal her enthusiasm. I am perplexed by her reaction. The individual I married almost 20 years ago is strikingly similar to her. Is she an alien from another planet? Did I ever truly know her? As I contemplated this, my understanding of the situation became increasingly unclear. Consequently, I concluded that attempting to rationalize the situation would be futile. I had cameras positioned throughout the house, and my sister and brother-in-law were aware of my suspicions. And my wife's sister and brother-in-law agreed to take my children for a few days because they enjoy visiting their aunt and uncle in the city. This provided my wife with the opportunity she desired. She contacted AP shortly after I left, and he arrived that evening to spend the night. I will not provide details regarding their activities in the house, you may fill in those details yourselves. Additionally, they engaged in continuous joking and openly discussed their infant, expressing the need to determine a course of action before the infant's physical development became apparent. By that point it was evident that the situation could not be attributed to me. AP is of a different racial background, making it relatively straightforward to ascertain that the infant was not mine from birth. My wife dismissed AP's concerns and she stated that they had months to determine the outcome, and then she candidly admitted that this was not her first extramarital relationship, as she had engaged in sexual intercourse with another man when she was 29 years old. She informed AP that she was weary of the responsibilities associated with the role of a traditional housewife and was tired of being around a man who was not as financially stable as she desired. She indicated that if it were not for the financial stability that I provided, she would have terminated the relationship long ago. Even her AP inquired about her plan for our children. She stated that he could have them. She expressed a desire to avoid contact with our children, believing they favored me and anticipating the imminent arrival of her do-over baby. I nearly hurled the laptop from my motel room due to my profound disgust. However, I managed to maintain composure and consumed a few beers from a six-pack. After purchasing dinner at a local diner, the couple proceeded to watch a movie. The husband spent the majority of the night in introspection, until he eventually succumbed to slumber. He reflected on his perception of his wife, believing he had a comprehensive understanding of her character. He had loved her and was prepared to offer her his utmost devotion. However, he came to realize that not all individuals are inherently benevolent. It is often only when they reveal their true nature that one can truly ascertain their true character. This realization prompted him to consider divorce as a means of retaliation. He recognized that, when provoked, he could become a formidable adversary. I promptly sought counsel from a law firm specializing in divorce litigation. I requested the most formidable attorney they had on staff. I reside in a jurisdiction where fault is a determining factor in marital dissolution. Consequently, my wife was immediately disadvantaged upon the revelation of my extramarital affair. Initially, the attorney was hesitant to accept my immediate engagement. However, after a detailed explanation of the circumstances and the presentation of select video footage, his demeanor shifted. He expressed enthusiasm and agreed to commence work immediately, citing the appeal of a case involving the dissolution of marriage. Their enthusiasm was palpable. Several weeks later, I was working from home while my children were in school. The eldest was in kindergarten, and the youngest was in preschool. The documents were delivered to my wife's hands by the local sheriff. The cameras captured the entire event. She appeared frightened while opening the envelope, reading the contents, and then became enraged. She rushed into my office to scream at me, but I remained composed throughout the interaction. I had already detached mentally from the situation. My wife desired to engage in a dispute, so I informed her that I had already made a decision and that I wanted her to leave our residence. I am the sole individual who has contributed to the mortgage payments. She verbally attacked me, stating that I could not act in such a manner, and then proceeded to threaten to inform others that I had physically assaulted her. I informed her that if she were to take me to court and risk losing my job, she would be wasting her time. I told her that her actions would not help her case. It was evident that she was already planning to take advantage of me, given that she was pregnant with her partner's child. She became enraged and began to cry. I informed her that I was aware of the situation and reiterated my request for her to leave. She declined, asserting that the residence was jointly owned. She then proceeded to barricade herself in the bedroom. I observed her engaging in a dramatic display on the security cameras before retrieving her phone and contacting the authorities. Despite her outwardly panicked demeanor, she wore a conspicuous smile while doing so. She remained silent throughout. I would have believed the actress's account over the telephone and in person if I had not already been made aware of her propensity for deceit. I awaited the arrival of the police with the front door ajar and instructed them to enter. Upon their arrival, the officers initially exhibited a high level of agitation and a desire for confrontation. However, a thorough examination of the premises revealed no evidence of a physical altercation. My wife emerged from the bedroom and grasped the uniform of one of the officers while expressing distress. I then requested that one of the other officers permit me to present evidence of the actual circumstances. He consented, which greatly surprised my wife, as she was unaware that I had recorded her. I proceeded to show the officer the footage from the cameras on a laptop, which depicted my wife stating that she would fabricate information with the intention of causing my downfall. I then presented the footage from the living room, which captured her fleeing from my office and entering the master bedroom down the hall. Subsequently, the footage from the camera in the bedroom depicted my wife calling the police and providing false information. I had recorded the incident from multiple angles and locations, yet despite her assertion to the police that I had physically assaulted her, there were no visible injuries on her person. Moreover, the cameras positioned throughout the house depicted a contradictory narrative. I then provided the police with a thumb drive containing the video footage they required to substantiate her allegations of false imprisonment. In the face of all this, she persisted in her assertion that I was an abuser. Furthermore, she attempted to claim that the recordings were illegal and therefore inadmissible. However, I was able to demonstrate that they were, in fact, legal, as they were security cameras located inside my own home and not recorded in a public setting. My wife then sought the intervention of the police, requesting that they take action. As a result, she was placed in handcuffs and began to display a highly emotional response. I was left with no choice but to observe the situation. I was dismayed to discover that this was the same woman I had loved for so many years. I had always considered her to be a wonderful, intelligent, and endearing person. However, my initial assumptions were proven to be erroneous when the police took her away. She began to scream that they could not do this to her, yet she did not actively resist arrest. Otherwise, resisting arrest would have been added to her charges. Consequently, I proceeded to terminate all of her credit cards that were in my name and ceased any further payments into the joint bank account. She was forced to utilize her personal finances to secure her release from custody, as her savings from years of employment, during which the mortgage was solely in my name, were insufficient to cover the costs. She subsequently returned to retrieve her vehicle, which I had packed with a few of her belongings and other items, and left the key in the ignition, preventing her from returning to the residence. My wife's parents did visit. She contacted me the following day after she secured her release from incarceration. Initially, she conveyed to her parents the same account she had provided to the authorities. Her father, in particular, was visibly agitated. Despite his advanced age and physical stature, he appeared taken aback when I inquired about his knowledge of my wife's extramarital affair and pregnancy. I then proceeded to retrieve the laptop to present the relevant evidence. Once the truth was revealed, they expressed profound disquiet and disbelief at the notion that this individual could be their daughter. They extended apologies and commitments to maintain contact and provide assistance with the children. Subsequently, they proceeded to call my wife on speakerphone, confronting her about her deceit. She initially attempted to maintain her position but was ultimately forced to concede, and they asserted their authority and presented the evidence. At this point, they were fully aware of the situation and demanded her immediate departure from their residence. She attempted to reverse the situation but was unsuccessful. My in-laws stated that they had not raised their daughter to be selfish, adulterous, or to attempt to frame her husband. They disowned her over the phone and terminated the call before my wife could respond. She attempted to call back, but they ignored her. When they arrived home, they discovered that she had departed and had damaged several items in their house, which my mother-in-law my ex-in-laws were visibly distressed. They still drop by from time to see their grandchildren, but my ex is effectively estranged from us. My wife later returned with her AP and began packing her belongings. AP refused to enter the house, and my wife was uncooperative, refusing to speak with me while she gathered her remaining belongings. She was aware that there were cameras everywhere and that her actions would be recorded. She was therefore deterred from attempting anything further. I was not alone, however, as my sister and brother-in-law were present to assist in monitoring her. Law observed AP from the window while my wife was still packing. She made no attempt to speak to either of them, not even when our youngest child cried for her before leaving. She did, however, take a few of the photos we had of each other from our wedding and throw them on the floor to break them. It seems that she was expecting a reaction from me, given the circumstances. She looked at me while doing it, but since I did not respond, she simply took the last of her bags and exited the premises. I was compelled to request the assistance of my elderly mother, as I was unable to adequately care for my children on my own. I was unable to take a significant amount of time off work and lacked access to suitable childcare options. Additionally, I arranged for DNA tests for my children, as I was confident in their paternity, but I was informed by several individuals that, in the event that I required confirmation, both of my children were indeed mine. Furthermore, I underwent testing for sexually transmitted infections, STIs, and was found to be free of any infections, thereby eliminating any potential concern in this regard. Approximately 1 week later, my wife reappeared at my residence and proposed a mutually agreeable divorce. She indicated that, in return for my compliance, she would have been entitled to half of our marital assets. However, I declined her proposal, and the discussion subsequently escalated into a heated exchange. She then conceded that she had discovered the legal landscape in this state was not on her side. We proceeded to meet, engage, and subsequently wed, residing in this state throughout our entire lives. It was evident that she would incur a significant financial setback unless I consented to a settlement, which I was not inclined to do. I then asserted that she had betrayed me, our children, her parents, and a vast majority of individuals by engaging in an extramarital affair. I then abruptly terminated the encounter by closing the door in her face. She departed quietly, and I did not see her again until the court hearing several months later. My wife was visibly pregnant by then, and she had retained legal counsel. AP was also absent. I anticipated that she would provide false testimony to the judge, and she did so on a few occasions. However, I had sufficient video evidence to refute her claims, so she was unable to gain an advantage. Instead, she attempted to prolong the divorce proceedings by simply refusing to cooperate. To cooperate and make various demands, she initially sought the majority of my savings, along with a comprehensive list of other assets I owned. She also demanded that I purchase her half of the house, despite her failure to contribute financially to the property. I, on the other hand, advocated for full custody of the children and the removal of her name from the house deed. I had video evidence to substantiate her assertion that she did not genuinely care for our children. Furthermore, she asserted that she would fabricate falsehoods and that she would prolong the proceedings by repeatedly modifying her demands. However, the judge did not permit her to prolong the proceedings. In this state, where fault is a determining factor, she was entitled to very little, given that she was the adulterer. Additionally, her attempts to frame me only exacerbated the situation. Ultimately, she lost all custody of our children and was left with nothing more. In light of the circumstances and the vehicle I had previously purchased for her, which was titled in my name, I signed it over as part of the settlement. She made no attempts to speak with our children throughout the divorce proceedings. As a result, I was granted full custody of the children and am now the sole owner of the house. I am also no longer bound by the terms of the separation agreement with my former spouse. Prior to and throughout the divorce proceedings, my wife attempted to maintain her false narrative about me. However, my sister disseminated information regarding my wife's infidelity, resulting in the severing of mutual friendships. Following the dissolution of the marriage, my wife and her romantic partner departed the area together. I have been informed that the individual in question was not dismissed from his position but rather transferred. I am uncertain of the specifics, but I do know that my former spouse was compelled to accompany him. They could have transferred him to a location in Greenland, but I am indifferent to that outcome. I am gratified that both individuals have departed. My former spouse should have terminated the relationship with her. At this juncture, I hope that my decision to post this account on Reddit was a worthwhile one. After discussing the recent release of a bunny with an accompanying hawk, I had initially intended to refrain from sharing my experiences on this platform. However, the comments I received regarding my wife's actions prompted me to reconsider. I have been aware of the potential issues for some time. I recognize that I have been unable to fully acknowledge the situation due to my inability to see the truth. However, I have now reached a point of acceptance. I would like to thank those who have read this, and I acknowledge that it is a lengthy account. However, I believe it is important to share my experience. I have now taken steps to remove my ex-partner's name from the property. My ex-wife's name was removed from the deed because all bank records that could be accessed showed that I was the sole payer. She also engaged in repeated argumentation with the judge, despite being in an at-fault state. Being a confirmed cheater places one in a disadvantageous position during a divorce. It is comparable to having a signed prenup against you. When I stated that I had secured the most formidable lawyer at the firm I was associated with, I was being entirely truthful. The attorney in question was both tenacious and astute. The financial settlement my wife received was $60,000, and she also acquired the vehicle I had purchased for her a couple of years ago, which cost me $50,000. The vehicle was already paid off. Furthermore, I transferred the title to her. My ex was also still offered partial custody of our children. However, since the video of her stating that she no longer cared about them had been seen, she did not pursue custody and willingly relinquished all rights to our children when she realized she could not get her way. For those who might think the police would not have arrested my ex for lying, they would be mistaken. The police here are not lenient, and my ex, with a sociopathic grin on her face, attempted to frame me as a wife beater, which is sufficient cause for arrest.